Welcome into the inaugural episode of the semester of the No Pulp Podcast. We're finally back here, and college football is in a wild swing. And speaking of wild swings, I know these two are going to have some very wild and hot takes for you as we break down every single major conference, and we'll even throw out some playoff winners. But guys, you know, how you two doing today? You guys ready to throw out some very big takes?
Leo, you know me well enough to know how happy I am today. Football's back. Life is good. What can I complain about?
It kind of took it all from me, to be honest with you. But yeah, of course I'm ready for my hot takes. Are you going to do some push-ups live on the air for us?
You know, I would love to, but the space isn't really perfect for it. Maybe we'll see towards the end.
How about we have a counter, and then after the show, you can do the push-ups.
Okay.
So we'll have a counter of how many bad takes I make, and then, you know, you'll do the push-ups. So let's say I make 4 bad takes, which is like a good over-under. And you can you just do them after the show.
Okay. Well,
so it'll be 40 push-ups.
We could definitely see about that. Maybe I'll keep a counter. I did forget to throw out introductions here because I'm just so excited to get into all this football. Obviously, I myself, Leo Silverman. That's Josh Golden for you. And on the far end is Jackson Holzer. It is going to be a very, very fun episode. But guys, let's start with the non-Power 5 schools. I mean, they obviously deserve their time in the spotlight. And there are a lot of interesting names here. So, Josh, I'm going to go here for you first. What could some of these names, maybe an independent team, maybe an American Conference team, really stands out to you right now?
Well, Leo, the obvious team to start out with is Cincinnati. I mean, they made the playoff last year, so have to start there. But they did lose a lot of pieces. The obvious one being their star quarterback Desmond Ridder, who I now believe is a New Orleans Saint. Correct? I might be wrong on that one, but. Anyway, he is.
I think he's a Falcon.
He's a Falcon.
You're right. He is a Falcon.
He's the other team.
I had the division right. Anyway, moving on. They got Ben Bryant. He had a good year last year with Eastern Michigan at quarterback. But Eastern Michigan, even though you're going to Cincinnati playing the AAC, still worse competition in Eastern Michigan. You don't know how he's going to fare there. There's a little bit to be concerned about there, but Luke Fickell is going to have that team ready to go like he always does. Had a little bit of a rough go week 1, but did hang with that Arkansas team. I don't think they're going to be quite as good as they were last year, but I think they're definitely going to be hanging around the top 25 all year, probably winning around 9-10 games.
Well, sticking with Cincinnati, first of all, they are now a non-Power 5 team, and they're not independent, which means they have to go undefeated in order to make the playoff, and they already lost. So you can say at this point their season is technically over, but their loss wasn't that bad. A 7-point loss on the road to Arkansas. That's not a big deal, especially The thing with Cincinnati that's different than a lot of other big school teams is that when you lose a guy like a Sauce Gardner or you lose a Desmond Ridder, you can't just replace those guys like Georgia can. Georgia has 15. We'll get to Georgia, but when Georgia has 15,000 defensive players taken in the first round, they can easily replace those guys. But at Cincinnati, you really can't. So it was kind of encouraging to see that they went on the road against a very good Arkansas team and really hung around there and almost won the game.
He had to sneak a jet in there too with Sauce.
Oh, don't worry. There'll be more jets. There'll be more jets. Don't worry.
I'm sure there will find some silly way to work it in. But sticking in the American Conference, a team that I want to talk about that hasn't lost a game.
So their season's still alive.
Their season is still alive according to the non-Power 5, non-independent logic. I really like this SMU squad. I mean, obviously they're not going to make any, they're not going to make any big bash in the college playoff. They're not going to make some giant run. It's just the nature of the American Conference and 4 teams currently. But, they start off hot 1-0. I really, really like Tanner Mordecai. I mean, this guy has been built up hype for, I feel like the entirety I've been in college from a couple of my buddies that go to SMU. This team has a pretty decently easy schedule. The tough ones, you do get to play Cincinnati at home, but you do have to go on the road at Houston. But what we just saw from Houston, they don't.
Houston games at home.
Oh, the Houston games at home as well. So
yeah, and Houston struggled. I think you were about to say that.
Yeah.
They struggled this week.
Houston did struggle going into that overtime game. I really like SMU as a team to talk about, but. Getting away from the American Conference, guys, there are some big names.
Let's go to the one that's most obvious.
Yeah.
We're thinking of the same team. Come on.
Yeah, it's obviously Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. There we go.
Which I have been heard is dubbed the most fraudulent college football program of all time. Is that one? I knew that was
fraudulent of all time.
Where did you get that idea?
A lot of people are throwing it out.
That's something Josh would definitely say.
It's Notre Dame. It's arguably the most historic college football program there.
They're just not the best. They're not the best, but they are one of the most historic programs in the country.
I've just been hearing waves.
From who?
Just a lot of people around here on campus. I'm not going to throw out my sources. I can't do that. I will say, though, there is that really interesting stat. I believe it was since 1999 or 2000, they are 2-22 against top 5 AP poll ranked opponents.
Against top 25?
Just five. Because they played Ohio.
Okay, can we be honest, though? They were not going to beat Ohio State on the road.
Right. I mean,
they were not going to beat Ohio State on the road.
Especially week 1.
Yeah.
Not the first game because he coached whatever bowl game they were in, but the second game of Marcus Freeman's career as a head coach, 33-year-old head coach, going on the road to Ohio State, that's a major challenge for him. The fact that they hung with them and covered that spread, I think that's very, very encouraging for Notre Dame progressing throughout their season. And Jackson, you like to talk a lot about teams getting eliminated in week 1.
No, they're still alive.
They're more than still alive. I think if they run the table, they're almost clearly in the playoffs.
Yeah, so talk to me, give me a little more big picture, because obviously a lot of people like to fixate on that week 1 matchup, but what are you, Josh, seeing for Notre Dame going forward for this whole season?
We'll get to our playoff prediction in a little bit, but I think they're going to be hanging around in the playoff, if not having a chance to really make it. I mean, let me take a look and pull up their schedule here, but their schedule, they're going to have a lot of opportunities to play against some high caliber teams. I mean, in 3 weeks, they're going on the road to a North Carolina team that has some expectations. Not the best team, but that's a good road win if you can pull that off. They're going to have to go to BYU 2 weeks later. That's a challenge going up to play over there. They're going to have to come to Syracuse as well. We know that can be a challenge, guys.
Enough
they will be in the Dome.
And they got Notre Dame at home as well, and they have to go to USC. Those are a lot of opportunities for big resume-boosting wins. If they run through the schedule and win them all, I think they're clearly in the college football playoff.
I mean, it's easy to say, well, if any team runs the table, they're going to be in the college football playoff. But the reality is that Notre Dame is not going to run the table. Their schedule is too tough. You mentioned all the teams.
But where's the loss coming?
You got to go to USC. That's a loss. That's 2.
I don't know
You're
about
out.
That defense can hang.
Oh, you're out at 2. You got to go. You got to play Clemson. That's tough.
We'll get to Clemson a little bit later.
I know we don't love Clemson, but
Clemson's
Clemson's tough. You got to go to BYU, and I know they don't have Zach Wilson. Hint, hint, another Jets reference. But still, BYU is a ranked team, so that's tough. You got to go to Chapel Hill. They're not going to go 11-0 for the rest of the season. They're just not.
Okay, so you two obviously are different stances on the Notre Dame record. I'm going to make both of you throw one out here because
I'm
curious.
8-4, 9-3.
8-4, 9-3. Are you
11-1?
11-1. Okay,
right.
so that does allude to the fact that maybe something we'll talk about later with Josh and his beliefs in the Fighting Irish. But you did also bring up one team who they will be facing that is also in this non-Power 5 schools preview that I feel like is the last one we really talk about. BYU once again is ranked. What is going on with that, Jackson? You got any sort of logic you can throw me on that one?
Well,
Zach Wilson is not playing quarterback.
Zach Wilson is not playing quarterback, and therefore, they do not have a very high chance of making the playoff. And I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't see much of their game against South Florida, but I look at the score and I see 50-21. That's pretty good.
South Florida's not a very good team.
Okay, fine, but that's still pretty good. You handled your business. You're going to have 2 prove-it games coming up. You got Baylor and you got Oregon, so I guess I'll have more an opinion after those games.
And you know who they played the week after that? Wyoming. We get a battle of 2 schools, AFC East quarterbacks there,
and
Jackson.
no Josh Allen in Wyoming, so there you go.
And we've already gotten in a Bills and 2 Jets references now.
You knew that was
3.
Where's your Eagles reference?
I'm trying to save them. You guys are just getting rid of them right out the
wait till Alabama.
That was the easy one for me
that was the easy one. But
wait till Alabama.
I do want to talk about this because BYU is ranked 21, and they have to go play Baylor, who is,
that's a
very good team. Oregon, we'll save our Oregon comments later.
Yeah, but you got to go on the road.
You got on the road to Eugene. So in my mind, I don't really know. BYU, they have such a tough schedule. You brought up they have to play Notre Dame. Going to
they got Arkansas coming.
They got Notre Dame in Vegas.
They do have Notre Dame in Vegas.
Oh, Vegas.
Okay, that's an interesting game.
They have to play Arkansas. They always have trouble playing Boise State when I see them play Boise State.
Got to go to Boise as well.
To
That's
Boise
never
as
an
well.
easy place to
the
play.
Blue Field. I just don't. I don't really see this season going very well. I think this might just be the peak of BYU, to be honest with you. I don't know if they'll be ranked again. I mean, they're going to lose next week.
Ranked again,
top 25.
So you're taking Baylor on Saturday night?
I would take Baylor.
I think
I would take Baylor too.
Yeah, but so that covers all of the sort of non-Power 5 schools. We'll dip into the first one. Kind of alluded to it with Baylor. We have the Big 12, which I would like to dub as the 3-horse race at this point.
Absolutely. I think it's a very clear 3-horse race.
Yeah, I mean, even the ranking show right now, you've got all 3 of these teams, and you got Baylor, the Sooners, and the Cowboys, not the Cowboys that I hate.
There's your Eagles reference.
Cowboys, there you go. All within about 4 rankings of each other. I believe you have the Sooners right now are at 7. You have Baylor, Sooners at 7, Baylor at 9, and Oklahoma State at 11. So what is your guys' outlook for this entire Big 12 this year? Because it feels weird with how much of a, what am I looking for, chaotic ending we had to the Sooners' schedule in life last year versus now.
Right, and with Oklahoma too, obviously a lot of questions surrounding that program. Obviously a new head coach coming in Brett Venables after Lincoln Riley leaves, and you know they're departing from the Big 12 in a couple of years as well. So that makes things a little bit more complicated as well. You don't really, there's just a lot of weird things going on at Oklahoma, but they do have a good team. I really like Dylan Gabriel, the transfer quarterback they got from UCF, had a great career there. He gets his shot at finally getting a chance to make the playoff at Oklahoma. They have a really good receiver in Marvin Mims Jr. as well. I think they have a really good team, but I think their cross-state rival is going to be the team that eventually wins the Big 12.
Ooh, okay.
I got Baylor in the Big 12.
Okay.
I got Baylor in the Big 12. I don't think their schedule is that particularly difficult. You got Oklahoma State, but that's
the team that wins it.
That's tough. That's on the road. But other than that, I look at it, going to Oklahoma, I think they can win that game. And the reason why is because Oklahoma's like the same team every year, and now they don't have Lincoln Riley. So I'm very curious to see how that offense looks as we keep going throughout the season. But we know that Oklahoma doesn't have a strong defense. It's like every year we say the same thing about Oklahoma. So I'm going to go with Baylor in that conference. I think they're going to get it done.
I will say, though, they've had a bad defense every year. That was with an offensive coach. They bring in a defensive head coach in Brett Venables.
I still think they're going to have a bad defense.
I don't disagree with you,
Yeah.
But I do want to point that out because I do think that is a very important thing to bring up, that they bring in not only a defensive head coach, a defensive head coach who was a former coordinator at Clemson and coached one of the best defenses in the country. I think that makes a big difference.
It's also Clemson.
It's certainly something to bring up. But when we talk about, because the Big 12, the big joke is always this is the no defense conference.
Right. Well,
right?
it is the no defense. Lately, it's become the no defense league, like college football in general. But we can keep going.
Yeah, but what I want to go to here is, if you obviously you have these bombastic offenses you can talk about, but when you come to a defense, I feel like Baylor is the strongest defense of the weak pack.
Exactly.
So, it's close.
Oklahoma State's defense can hang too.
I
think you got to give that team some credit.
If any of these teams made the college football playoff, and it's unlikely they do, but if any of these teams make it, they're going to get clobbered. Bottom line. Because they do not have the defenses to be able to hang with these other top teams in other conferences. But within their own conference, they can kind of hang around with each other.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm on the fence between OK State and Baylor. On one hand, my decider might be the fact that I don't want to say the Cowboys win anything, even if it's college football days. But yeah, I really think this is going to come down to defense, and I would favor the Baylor Bears right now. But the Big 12 is just pure chaos every year. I mean, there was points where we had like Kansas State making a run and knocking some of these teams down. They just find ways to lose the dumbest conference games. I feel like those top Big 12 teams.
Right. The other thing about Oklahoma State that I do want to have to bring up, though, is in order to win the Big 12, they're going to have to beat Baylor and Oklahoma, obviously, and in order to do that, they're going to have to play both those games on the road, which is a lot more challenging, obviously, to have to go into those tough environments, especially having to go to Oklahoma to the cross-state rival. You know that game is going to be nuts. But I just think the chip on their shoulder after what happened in that Big 12 title game last year, ending up 1 yard short of winning that game. I love Mike Gundy. I think Spencer Sanders is going to have a phenomenal year at quarterback and really elevate himself into that draft discussion. I think he's a great talent, and I think the motivation that they have after last year's loss is going to get them over the top to win the Big 12.
Okay, well, it certainly feels weird that none of us are picking the Sooners. It feels weird.
It's just they don't have Lincoln Riley anymore.
It makes sense.
I think that matters.
It's kind of a rebuild year for them.
It is.
Year
it is
one
a
is
rebuild.
really hard to find
it's a rebuild, but like they're still going to be very good.
Right.
It just feels weird to say out loud, though. Like we've been so used to at least somebody talking about the Sooners winning the Big 12.
I mean, don't get me wrong. They're going to hang in the top 25 all year, no doubt. Will they be playing that game against Oklahoma State, saying that the winner goes to the Big 12 title game? Probably. But I'm going to pick Oklahoma State in that game.
And that's a totally fair choice. But the reason I want to bring the Sooners back, I'm nobody picking them. You mentioned Lincoln Riley. I'm going to pull us out of the Big 12 here. We're still sticking with the number 12, but we're going to go over to the Pac-12 here, where Lincoln Riley's new home. I always like to just take 5 seconds to laugh at the Pac-12 because I think it gets overhyped every year. I mean, and we already saw week 1 with the Ducks. I mean, I'm sure none of us thought they were going to. Okay, none of us thought they were going to win, right?
Well, their
Georgia.
line was
not
what,
a chance.
16 points?
17.
17, whatever.
But there's losing and then there's getting trounced.
So
49-3 was the final,
49-3, I believe.
I don't think Georgia punted. Like I think their first 7 possessions were all touchdowns.
It was
bad.
Yeah,
it was really bad.
It was really bad.
My problem with Oregon, and Oregon's going to win some games this year. They're like an 8, 9, 10 win team maybe, but you got Bo Nix at quarterback. Every time Bo Nix plays against a good team, he turns into a pumpkin. It's just how it is. He's been around for so long, and every single time I see Bo Nix in a big game, he's throwing another interception.
That's true.
It's funny. He has like 6 picks a year, which sounds good, right? And then those 6 picks come against like good teams.
Exactly.
So I don't trust Oregon to do anything. Utah was impressive. I know they lost, but can we forgive them for losing on the road to a pretty good Florida team?
Absolutely.
Pretty good. Anthony
Especially
Richardson.
on the road
We'll
in that
talk more about the
environment,
SEC, but Anthony Richardson looked really good out there. And
Completely
Utah hung in there and probably should have won that game. It's a tough environment to go into the swamp. I think they're going to make some real noise this year. I don't think they're going to make the playoff, but they're still going to be a good team. And then you have USC. And I think USC is the obvious choice to win the conference. Their offense, Caleb Williams, he looked fantastic. You got that guy Jordan Addison. He's fantastic as well. I think they're going to have a ton of touchdowns together. You can already see them on draft boards. Caleb Williams, I know, is not this year. He's the following year. I think USC is an easy pick to win that conference.
I want to go back to Utah, though, because I think there's just one thing that you didn't highlight that I need to discuss. I'm a little more kind of keen to this Utah team after going. I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to go to last year's Rose Bowl where they played Ohio State. If you guys remember that game, that was just a phenomenal football game, 48-45 final. Ohio State won.
The literal essence of college football.
It was phenomenal.
Well, that's why I say now it's the league where there's no defense.
Yeah,
right.
I get it.
But in that game, and also in that Florida game as well last week, Cameron Rising, Utah's quarterback, was just absolutely phenomenal. That kid has a motor on him.
When it mattered, what did he do against Florida? When it mattered.
He made a couple of mistakes in that game.
That was a big mistake. And if you watched that drive, he should have thrown a pick on like the second play of the drive. It should have been over.
It did get dry. Yeah, I remember that was a bad
drop. It was a drop pick, and I thought at that point the Gators were going to lose. I was so mad. I thought they were going to lose. I was like, they had it right there. And then sure enough, he just throws a pick in the end zone. I'm like, I had to watch the replay, I think, 5 or 6 times to try to figure out what he was seeing. And then I finally saw it, like his receiver slipped down, but even then, even if he was staying upright, it still would have been picked off. It was like a terrible throw. You just didn't see the linebacker.
At least would have been at least wouldn't have been completed, and like at that point in the game, can't throw it down away like that.
Yeah,
but
sure.
But yeah, keep going. I mean, Utah.
He had a very impressive game in that Rose Bowl game. Obviously, there were a couple of mistakes in that Florida game, but overall, I thought it was a decent performance, especially against a good defense in that environment as well. Having to use a silent count in a crazy environment like that, I thought he was pretty impressive, and I think Cam Rising is a guy who's also going to become a household name this year.
I mean, he gets points for name.
Right. Just a great name.
Right off the bat.
Cameron Rising.
Cameron Rising is just...
He's rising.
Why? He's rising. I see.
He's
shrinking.
It's just an elite
He's shrinking.
name.
Oh,
you got to get some points for elite name. That's an elite name off the board.
Absolutely.
Here's my problem.
It just gives me more ammunition to make fun of it.
That's definitely true. That's the problem with some of those last names is you get ammunition. It looks nice, but also it just sets you up to get completely memed on Twitter. Here's my problem with the Pac-12, though. I don't see the Trojans playing a game where you have any sort of semblance that they're going to lose until, Thanksgiving. When
they got to go
face
to
Notre
Utah.
Dame. They do have to go to Utah.
They have to face Utah. Going to Utah is never easy.
It is never easy, but listen, we already hyped up Lincoln Riley. We already talked about how the Sooners look without it. Caleb Williams looks very, very nice right now. And, it's nice to talk about a Pac-12 team that isn't Oregon that's going to run this, conference right now. And, they don't really have to play anybody huge in my mind until Notre Dame, November 26th.
You're really not giving any respect to Utah.
One last thing I want to say about Utah, though. You look at what they did last year in winning the Pac-12, their 2 big games that they needed to win the Pac-12 was obviously the Pac-12 title game against Oregon and their matchup against Oregon earlier in the season. I can't remember the exact scores of both those games. I believe they won them by a combined 65 points or something crazy like that. Just absolutely dominated them, showed up when they needed to show up. I think they're going to do the same thing against
Remember
USC.
when Oregon beat Ohio State last year?
Yes,
remember that?
Week 1, yeah.
In Oregon? And that's the only reason why Ohio State didn't make the playoff.
Yep.
Someone from the Pac-12 always does something weird. Feels like it happens every year.
It does happen. It does seem to happen every year. I'm personally glad to see it wasn't Georgia that fell for that this time around. But yeah,
that was bad.
Yeah,
that was ugly.
That was ugly. But I really like this Trojans teams. Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley is just a tandem that I've fallen in love with through week 1, and I'm ready to go to battle about. So if I get burned in the middle of Utah,
you ready to be a Trojan?
I'm basically ready to be a Trojan.
All right,
sign me up. Give me the spear and the shield. I'll run.
Join
right
the
in
train,
there.
man. Join the train.
Exactly. But if it gets me burned in Utah in the middle of October, so be it. I will take it, but I think this Trojan team is going to lose 1 game, and I think they will be the Pac-12 champions.
Interesting. And
you know
does
what
that
one loss
Pac-12
means?
champion get you into the college football playoff?
No, it may not. I'm not going to say right now. Got to say it for later.
All right.
I definitely want to say that for later. But so quickly, you guys talked about Utah and the Trojans. Are you rocking with Utah to win?
I'm rocking with Utah. Yeah,
Okay.
I really like Cam Rising. I think he's incredibly talented. I just think there's going to be some growing pains down the line somewhere with Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, and all these new pieces of USC. A lot going on out there. Of course, another team we mentioned with Oklahoma earlier, another team that's going to be moving conferences in a couple of years.
Yeah.
USC going to the Big Ten, which we can have a whole nother discussion
Yeah, that's
about.
a whole other
about
discussion.
Right.
I
But
love it, though.
I just think there's a lot going on there. Some distractions. I think Utah having that core back and with Cam Rising and a couple of their other pieces as well, I just think they're motivated, ready to go.
All right, so Utah, Jackson,
USC.
beautiful.
USC?
Yeah, USC.
All right,
I mean,
all right,
there
all
we
right.
go. No,
I'll
no,
stay along
Josh
with
is
my
the
Utes.
contrarian.
I'll
so
stay
far.
along with my Utes. It's fine.
Hey, I respect standing your ground. That's fine. Just stick with the Utah. I was about to say Utah Jazz. Man, I'm getting thrown off into a whole other,
Look at that
sport
reference.
here. Yeah, the NBA reference. There we go. But we'll go from the Big 12 here. We went to the Big 12. Went to the Pac-12, and now we're gonna go to a conference where I feel like you could argue like six teams could kind of win if you really want to get crazy. What
Syracuse?
I mean,
do we want to go there?
Let's go. I mean, this is the ACC. I mean, what are you guys thinking? I mean, this has got to be the most hectic one to assess off the bat, right?
Look, Garrett Schrader had some game on Saturday night.
PFF's highest rated quarterback.
No.
I don't know how
person
much
says-
stock you
really
put
forget
into
that.
Pro Football Focus, but highest rated quarterback in week one.
I think it's fair to argue that the game that Garrett Schrader played on Saturday night was better than any game Tommy DeVito played in a Syracuse uniform.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt,
and I
Tommy
think-
DeVito was terrible.
He had some good moments.
Where's he at
don't
right
get me
now?
wrong.
Northern Illinois? How are they doing?
They're 1-1, I believe.
Oh, that's
But
great.
Cool.
yeah,
I mean,
they won that first game against Wyoming and covered. Thank you for that. But
of course.
here's what I'll say about Syracuse. It's all going to be about keeping Sean Tucker healthy.
Yeah.
That's just the key to the season. I think when he went down for a minute in, I believe it was the second quarter.
Something like that.
Right before the half, yeah.
All I know is that it took
I
the
wasn't in the
wind out of the
dome,
building.
but you could hear a ping drop in there. And if anything happened to him long term, that's the entire season. I think we can all agree on that.
Yep.
So it's all about just keeping him healthy, limiting him getting hit in the times where you can, and just making sure that his legs are fresh as we go down the stretch.
Before we get to more relevant ACC teams, and we can stick with Syracuse a little bit, I was actually talking with my buddies last week, and I got a buddy at Texas. Some of my friends are at Florida. Now I say it's Syracuse. So we all kind of root for each other. We're all kind of talking about who's the best player out of all the teams. And I said to my friends, guys, I'm not talking about the best draft eligible prospect. I'm talking about just the best player right now between those three teams. And I think that's Sean Tucker.
You said Syracuse,
Texas, and Florida. I think Sean Tucker is incredible.
I
watch him and I see a guy that's going to be playing on Sundays.
I agree.
Very easily. And he's just right now a pro playing in college.
I might have to argue
but
Anthony Richardson, but
maybe. I like Richardson too. We can get to him later.
It's also very funny that of the three teams you're grouping in there, two of them have who you could argue is the two best running backs in the nation.
I know.
Texas and Syracuse.
I know.
That's very funny.
I know.
But
Bijan Robinson's great.
Bijan
And he's probably a better
Robinson's great.
prospect, but I don't know who's a better college football player right now.
But so let's steer back to the ACC here because we will have time to talk about Texas down the line, obviously. But so I mean, obviously we're talking about there's a lot of teams that can compete. So what do you think about Clemson? Because Clemson's been the big bad of the ACC.
Clemson wasn't
for a
very
couple
good
years.
last year, were they?
Here's the first thing I want to say about Clemson. I don't know how closely you guys were paying attention to that game against Georgia Tech on Monday night.
They didn't look very good.
They didn't look very good, but did you notice when they looked their best?
Not really.
It was late in the fourth quarter when their true freshman quarterback, Cade Klubnik, came into the game.
Are you saying what I think I'm saying?
I am saying bench DJ Uyunglele.
I agree.
And start Cade Klubnik, and you will win the ACC and probably make the college football playoff. Cade Klubnik is a superstar, will one day be the #1 pick in the NFL draft. I think this guy's phenomenal. I don't want to say he's Trevor Lawrence because that's obviously a big comparison.
Nice.
I think they could have similar careers.
Trevor
at Clemson.
Lawrence was
I
only
really
the best high school prospect ever in the last 20
and
years.
Cade Klubnik is one of the best quarterback prospects to come out in the past couple of years as well. So I think this is a big get for Clemson when they got him. We saw the couple of plays that I believe it was a drive and a half or so that he had against Georgia Tech. He looked phenomenal. I think you got to get this kid more reps. I don't think DJ Uyunglele has done enough for this offense in the year and change that he's had to play around with it. Eventually, they're going to have to make a move, and I think they got a guy really sniffing down his neck.
What I don't understand about DJ is, like, people defend this guy, and I look and I'm like, you're on one of the best teams in the country, talent-wise. Clemson, you have everything you could possibly want, and you're in a weak conference. It's a weak conference, the ACC. It's not very good. And I look at last year, 56% completion percentage. Okay, fine. 2,200 yards in 13 games. Okay, maybe you just ran the ball a lot, right? Well, then 9 touchdowns to 10 picks. Like, I'm sorry.
The public's not doing that.
I don't care who. Like, you're on Clemson. You better be better than 9 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. They won 9. How many games did they win last year? 9 or 10?
I believe 9. Did they win the bowl game? They won 9 before the bowl game.
They won 9 before the bowl game. And they did it with a quarterback who threw 9 touchdowns to 10 picks. So I agree with you. You got to bench him.
Wow.
You got to bench him. I don't know how much more you need to see of him.
10-3. They were 10-3 last year.
So you won 10 games with a terrible quarterback.
My one thing I will say is with this true freshman, I mean, I'll play, on the other side here. He was going against Georgia Tech.
It doesn't matter.
Defense.
My point is that he can't be any worse. He cannot be worse than this guy.
But,
9 touchdowns to 10 picks is the worst you can possibly do with that roster.
Not even he can't be worse. You bring in a 5-star true freshman for a reason.
You don't want to lose him. Remember, Georgia played Jake Fromm over Justin Fields.
And where'd he go?
And where did Justin Fields go following that season?
Obviously, it worked out in the end for Georgia. They ended up with
it worked out like 3 or 4 years later. But if you kept Justin Fields and you played him early on, like Clemson did with Trevor Lawrence, you might have won a national title earlier. But they didn't.
So my point here was not that you don't try this. It's that it was against Georgia Tech's defense.
Absolutely.
So allow him.
How did DJ look
play
against the Georgia Tech defense?
I mean,
not great. Not great.
He didn't look great. But here's my point.
He wasn't bad either. I want to give him a little credit.
He wasn't
had a decent
bad.
game.
That's like the worst thing you can say about someone.
Right.
He wasn't bad.
I mean, they were playing Georgia Tech.
That means he wasn't good.
Clobbered them. But
they did clobber him. I want to see him against an actually good defense, which I'm saying is like, sure, let's let the true freshman play. If you
they
actually
got Furman next week, so that's that's a great defense.
Here's the thing.
Then they got Louisiana Tech, Louisiana Tech.
They're not probably.
But that's the thing. You're playing 2 bad teams.
So why not play the true freshman?
Right. Give Klubnik some reps in these games. See what he can do.
They're gonna win anyway.
I'm sure he'll get reps. I guarantee he'll get reps actually. Right. But yeah, I want to see him against. I want to see him in Winston-Salem.
I agree.
Let's give him some reps, and he's a true freshman, so I don't know. It's definitely a weird spot for Clemson, but I want to go off Clemson for a second because I think we could sit here talking about Clemson for a while.
We can.
There's a couple. I mean, there's a lot of ranked teams here in the ACC now. Obviously,
but they're all just kind of mediocre.
A lot of them are mediocre, and a lot of them had pretty wild starts to the season. I mean, Pitt finally got to go play their rival again in West Virginia. That was I'm blanking. What was that game used to be called? It's like the Backyard Brawl. Backyard Brawl. I had it in my head and I was scared to say it because I didn't want to mess it up. The Backyard Brawl.
That game was phenomenal.
Phenomenal game. You then had NC State, who they dropped a couple of rankings. I think they were 13. They're now 18 after they barely squeaked out a win. So what do you really think about NC State? You then have,
Really shouldn't have won that game, too. ECU's kickers still having nightmares.
Yeah.
You mentioned Pitt, and what I would say about Pitt is, like, Pitt's like one of those teams, like a Cincinnati, and I know they're Power 5 technically, but it's one of those teams where you lose a guy like Kenny Pickett. You can't just replace him.
Right.
So I don't see Pitt going anywhere.
And that's the thing. You can't just replace him, and they tried to replace him. And I just don't think Caden Slovis is quite on Kenny Pickett's level.
Of course not. Kenny Pickett was a first-round pick.
What about hand size statistics? Do you think they're...
That you might have us on. Kenny Pickett does not have big hands.
No, but throughout that game against West Virginia...
I don't have big hands either.
Slovis made a couple of plays.
So it doesn't matter.
Slovis made a couple of plays in that game against West Virginia, but nothing really stood out to me as something that was like...
That's the point.
Right.
You see, Alabama is going to lose Bryce Young, and it's not going to matter.
But Caden Slovis is also a guy who was highly recruited as well and had a lot of expectations coming into college. I think there's a reason why he had to transfer, and that he's... he had to transfer because Lincoln Riley didn't want him.
Why didn't he want him?
Because he got Caleb Williams.
Also because Slovis is...
Not that good.
Not that good. There you go. If Slovis was great, there's no need for Caleb Williams.
I agree. The other team I do want to talk about while we're discussing some quarterbacks.
There we go. I see it.
I want to talk about Miami.
Yeah.
Because Tyler Van Dyke is probably the best quarterback in the conference, I think it's fair to say.
Yep.
I think he has been a very good player for them the past couple of years. I think he's going to be...
He had a big year last year,
I think they're going to have a really strong year. I think if Clemson doesn't make the change to Klubnik, they will probably win the conference. If they do go to Klubnik, I'm going to pick Clemson, though.
For whatever reason with Miami, they got the best quarterback in the conference, but it's the ACC, and I can't trust anybody. I really can't. I don't really, like with the other teams, like in other conferences, I have conviction. Like, I think this team's going to win the conference. But the ACC, I'm like, throw a shot in the dark. Who do you want? You want Clemson? You want Miami?
Right, which is why I hate picking Clemson, too, as the clear favorite.
You want to pick Syracuse for all I care? I don't know. I mean, maybe Miami wins it. They do have the best quarterback, so it's a decent case. But, you got to go to Clemson.
You do have to go to Clemson.
You got to go to Clemson on the road.
You have to go to Texas A&M
that's
as well
that's
early
a
in the
loss.
season. That's a very tough game. I do like the Canes a lot, but I will pivot because we are on a clock here, and there's a lot of ACC teams to cover. I do want to quickly say for the Demon Deacons, very nice to see Hartman back.
Yeah.
And I think they're a very good team that you could reasonably justify making a run as well, because here's a factor with the Demon Deacons. I mean, you talk about Pitt, transfer quarterback. You talk about Miami, they might have the best quarterback in the conference. This Demon Deacon squad kept a lot of their core together from last season, which was a successful season for Wake Forest. And now you have Hartman back. I think they can make a realistic run as well. And I'm in the same boat as you, Jackson. Can't trust them. But I mean,
can't trust anybody.
You can't trust anybody, but I like them as well. So I am gonna, wrap up the ACC. I am gonna make you guys pick somebody. I mean, we've been
I'll
picking
pick
for
Miami.
all time.
Why not?
Okay, Miami.
Well, I'm going with a little bit of an asterisk here. Give me Miami. If Clemson makes the change to Cade Klubnik, I want Clemson.
The classic Josh Golden asterisk. I've heard that so many times.
And
Way too
going
many.
with Wake.
I'm going to go with Wake because I want to be fun, and I would rather get burned having fun than just pick.
I'll also add, I said Tyler Van Dyke is the best quarterback in the conference. Sam Hartman's number 2.
Yeah, 100%. Sam Hartman's number 2. Wait, so okay, and this is definitely a segue. So then, what do you guys think of the NC State quarterback, especially after that? Because he was highly touted.
That was a very bad performance against an East Carolina defense that they really should be carving up. I think he's probably 3 as well, don't get me wrong, but...
Not Schrader?
Not quite there yet.
Garrett Schrader's number 1.
No, there we go. Yeah.
Garrett Schrader's the best.
I think Leary does have some room to grow, though, especially with the arm strength. I think if he wants to make it to the NFL, he's going to have to kind of strengthen that arm and also just make some of the quicker throws as well.
I wish we had a lot more time to go into that game. Also, with the North Carolina game, I wish we just had so much more time to go over, but we really don't.
That game was so much fun.
North Carolina is one of the craziest endings I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
I do want to quickly get out there because we talked about Miami's SEC opponent was Texas A&M. Wake gets to play Vanderbilt.
There we go.
And they get.
You know why Vanderbilt is in the SEC? It's for the grades.
I was going to say for baseball.
I was going to say for grades.
I was going to say for baseball, but that's a whole other topic. And they also get Clemson at home, so that's your biggest opponent in the ACC. They don't play Miami. You get Clemson at home. It's a pretty light schedule for Wake, but speaking of SEC teams, I think it's finally time that we don't actually. I totally threw myself off. We're not going to go anywhere near the South. We're going to go up north because I feel like the conference we've been talking about the most is the Big Ten. So I mean. Ohio State, Michigan, Jackson.
I first want to touch on Iowa.
Okay.
Scoring 7 points.
Without a touchdown.
Without a touchdown.
That game
is
was
so funny.
So crazy. It was unbelievable. I wanted it to end at 5-3, but 7-3 might be better.
Iowa stinks. I was terrible. But you know what? Scoring 7 points without a touchdown, that I've never seen before. I'm going to give them a shout out for that. But, that team is
I saw something where, they punted 8 times in that game. I'm going to get this stat somewhat wrong, so I'll find it and try to get it right. But of all the teams since 2000 who have won games while punting at least 8 times, there's I think 9 of them, and Iowa has 7 of them, or something insane like that. I got to double check that stat.
Iowa had a great week 1. They won.
They won.
They won, and they had 2 safeties.
Yeah, 2 safeties and a field goal for Iowa. That's absolutely nuts. But so obviously we have the heavy hitters.
Ohio State.
The Wolverine, Ohio State. But before we get to them, what do you guys make of these other 2 ranked teams that are floating around? I mean, obviously you always have Wisconsin is kicking around, and then you have the Sparties.
I like Mel Tucker. I do like Mel Tucker.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
With Wisconsin, they got that running back Braylon Allen.
They always have some.
I know, but that's like another. That looks like Jonathan Taylor 2.0.
It's just what they do.
And it is what they do, but they can't really throw, and that's always been their Achilles heel. So I don't see them going anywhere. But they'll be a good team.
Okay, so you're still in the factor of this is a two-horse
race, and it's really Ohio State's conference to lose, and they did not look particularly great.
I think you can say that literally every year that it's Ohio State's conference to lose.
But
sometimes they lose it.
My thing with Ohio State is that, first of all, last year they laid an egg versus Oregon, and then they had to go to Michigan.
Right, but last year it was still Ohio State's conference to lose. They just lost it in Ann Arbor.
This year, well, they get Michigan at home. And we looked this up before the show. The last time Michigan won at Ohio State was in 2000.
You weren't born yet, nor was I.
I was not born. Josh wasn't born. Were you born?
Depends what month.
I think they said it was November.
It's always in November.
I was fresh 20-something days old.
Nice. Okay, so you get the idea here. We're not even alive for the last time Michigan won at Ohio State. So as long as Ohio State wins 11 games and they take care of business versus Michigan, they're going to be in the playoff rather easily. And they're going to win the conference pretty easily.
If they win 11 games, it depends what the loss is. If it's a bad loss,
it doesn't matter.
But
it doesn't matter because it doesn't.
If they lose a game to...
It's Ohio State. They get the benefit of the doubt even if they lose to a bad team.
So we could save that one loss discussion for the playoff picks.
Right.
But Josh, with this Ohio State squad, obviously you got Mr. CJ up there that's going to be going in the draft. Do you like this team to take the Big Ten this year?
Yeah, probably. So like I said earlier, I was at the Rose Bowl game, so I obviously saw this Ohio State team, and C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba, their wide receiver. I think that's the best quarterback-receiver duo in the country. The way they played that game was just absolutely fun. How long is he going to be out for, though? Not that long,
It's not that it matters. They also have Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right,
they are really good. So
they have Marvin Harrison Jr. They also have Julian Fleming as well. Who's going to be an NFL
Henderson's
player
a very underrated running back. No one really talks about him, but he's very good.
They just always have talent at the skill positions.
That's the thing.
Not only do they always have talent at the skill positions, they're always so deep at those skill positions as well. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Julian Fleming were on the roster last year, and they didn't really do much. Because they had Chris Olave and I'm blanking on the other one.
Garrett Wilson. Come on. That's another Jet right there.
I'm sorry about that one. Chris Olave was better.
Another Jet.
Hey, the Jets are really good at getting those college players because they're always picking high in the draft, so they're going to get the best college players.
If you haven't been able to tell, the number of references to your NFL team you make on this podcast directly reverses how good you're going to be this NFL season. So the fact that he's made about 7, he's made 1, I've made 1.
Well, yeah, we know the Jets aren't going to be very good.
Well, using that logic, I should have made 0, but that's not the point.
But that's not the point.
Anyway, I do want to talk about the other team in the Big Ten that's worth mentioning, and that's the Michigan Wolverines. I mean, there's one thing to talk about with Michigan, and that's the quarterback situation.
Which they've never been good at.
But here's the thing. They have 2 of them. They have 2
They don't have Tom Brady.
Cade McNamara is a good player. He didn't have his best performance last week against Colorado State.
Okay.
But this week, they're starting J.J. McCarthy, their 5-star recruit, who had a decent year last year when they gave him some looks. It's very interesting to me that they still haven't named a starter going throughout the season. The fact that they're starting 2 different quarterbacks weeks 1 and 2 in games that, let's be honest, they could start their 5th-string quarterback and probably win against
and then
Colorado
they're going to have UConn in week 3, so they're going to win that game.
I didn't know they're playing UConn
Then they
next
got
week.
Maryland in week 4, so they're going to win that game too.
Right, but eventually down the line when you play, your Penn States, your Michigan States, your Ohio States, you're going to need to be comfortable with your quarterback. And do you want that quarterback to be your vet in Cade McNamara, or do you want your top recruit in J.J. McCarthy? It's going to be interesting to see what they do here, and I think that's a big, big question surrounding this Michigan football team. I think they end up going to J.J. McCarthy.
So here's my take here, right? The only McNamara I care about is Jerry. Give me the Buckeyes, roll Buckeyes. That's all my pick. I mean, listen, even when you look at their schedule, you guys talked about the fact that Michigan is at home. It's also the last game before you go to conference championships. The hardest game outside of that is you have to go to East Lansing in October. Outside of that, you're playing Toledo. You're playing Arkansas State next week.
This is Ohio State.
Ohio State. You're playing Toledo. You have to go to at Michigan State, obviously.
That's their tough one.
That's their tough one.
You got to go to Penn State. That's probably going to be the whiteout game.
That's the whiteout game.
That's a tough environment.
That's a tough environment.
That's another team I wanted to mention.
That's like that TikTok where you can't hear anything.
That's another team I wanted to mention. Do not sleep on Penn State. Sean Clifford, back for his 6th year, has been around for obviously a very long time with that program. This is going to be his last chance to really try to do something great at Penn State. I think they're going to hang around this conference title picture as well. I don't think they'll be winning the conference by any means, but I think they're going to hang around in the picture for sure.
My big point, though, was that
I think they might win that Ohio State game as well.
They could. I think they could. But you get Michigan at home at the end of the year, it's just like kind of like a perfect signaling to have an undefeated season or at least, win the Big Ten, which is my pick. I'm assuming this is the first time we're going to agree in the entire
I think we're all taking Ohio State.
I'm taking Ohio State. I think, especially with C.J. Stroud, he's just a phenomenal quarterback. Probably going to be a top 5 pick in next year's draft.
Yep.
Yeah,
probably number 1.
I don't know about that.
Well, that's a whole other discussion.
But that's different. But regardless, the Big Ten most of the time is going to come down to the game, and it's Michigan-Ohio State, and it's in Ohio State. I think both teams at some point are probably going to lose a game during the regular season because that's usually what happens. Mm-hmm. And Ohio State's at home, and they're going to beat Michigan. Michigan's going to be like, oh boy, our season's over, and Ohio State's going to go to the dance, I guess.
I don't know if Michigan's going to lose a game before Ohio State. It doesn't really seem like they get
always
tested
do.
on the road.
Their
big test on the road is Iowa.
It doesn't matter. They always find a way. They're going to lay an egg at some point. They always
Just because they lay an egg doesn't mean they'll lose.
The big takeaway, though,
I think that's my point,
is that we're all taking the Buckeyes.
Ohio State, yes.
So, Now, we talk about the Buckeyes. Obviously, we've been alluding to the fact that they're going to be, dancing in the college football playoff. You could argue the next 3 teams that they'll be matched up with can come from this next conference because we're getting to the big bad here.
The big bad wolf.
The
I
SEC,
don't know about 3, but that's a whole other discussion.
But you could definitely entertain the argument it could be 3 if you wanted to. That's just the SEC
probably.
for you.
It's not arguable. This is the best conference in college football. I do not want to entertain any other discussions about it.
It definitely is the best conference in college football right now, at least purely from AP polls rankings. I believe they're at 8 teams right now ranked, which includes the new additions of like Tennessee. Obviously, you have your Alabamas, your Georgias.
Hey,
even
what about my Gators?
And the Gators.
They jumped to 12.
Yeah, here I'll give you your shining moment, Jackson.
One shining moment.
Don't sleep on Arkansas as well. After we mentioned earlier that big win against Cincinnati,
Ole Miss jumped back into the poll as well. It's just stacked with talent. But I do want to give Jackson his moment because the Gators.
This is my one shining moment to talk about the Gators because I am a big Gators fan. And the reality with Florida is their season comes down to the same game every year, and it's Georgia. It's always that game, and they're probably not going to win that game because Georgia is so good. Like, I can't even describe to you how good that Georgia team is. But Florida's very sneaky because that Anthony Richardson kid. And I remember seeing him a little bit last year, and all of my friends who were there would always say, they got to play Richardson. They got to play him. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, really? Are you sure they got to play him?
Remind me who they played at quarterback last year? Where's the guy?
Emory Jones.
Right. He was not very good.
Emory Jones wasn't very good, but I was like, if Anthony Richardson can't beat out Emory Jones, like, what are we doing here?
Right.
And then I see in week 1, Richardson against a tough Utah team basically carry Florida single-handedly. And I'm like, you know what?
Made some wild plays.
I think there's a reason why
that play at the goal line where he spun out was phenomenal.
I think there's a reason why Dan Mullen's no longer there.
For sure.
And because I think Anthony Richardson should have been the quarterback all along. And that Gators team, they're probably not going to make the playoff, but they are very interesting, and they're going to beat a team that you probably don't think they're going to beat. Don't know who, but they're going to beat somebody.
I mean, they already did that, right? I mean,
they
jumped
favored.
from unranked to 12.
They were.
How often do you see that?
So
week 1, a couple times.
You see that occasionally. It's actually the biggest jump since like 2009 or 2010.
It has to be.
From week 1, like unranked. I think it happened in the same year. There were 2 teams. I think one of them was Texas, and they went from unranked to like number 10. It's just the way it goes sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so the Gators, obviously a big talking point. But Josh, there's just so many to pick from. It's the cream of the crop. Is there a team outside of Bama and Georgia that you're excited to watch this year, think can make some noise, ruining some playoff runs?
You know me, when you say something like that, I just think who's the best quarterback. And I got to give a shout out to Will Levis at Kentucky. Can't quite say I endorse some of his eating habits, but in terms of what he does on the field, you're not familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
He puts mayonnaise in his coffee and also, and also eats bananas without peeling them.
Apparently that one's good for you. Apparently that one's better for you.
That's some psycho stuff.
Apparently it's better for you.
Hold on, he eats the peel.
Yeah, just.
Have you ever tried the peel of a banana before?
I haven't tried it, but I have heard it's healthier for you.
Don't try it.
I will not try that. I cannot quite endorse some of those things.
How is it healthy for you? It's the peel. It gets like stepped on and muddy. That's kind of the point of the peel.
But it has some of the nutrients in it, I guess.
Nutrients, antioxidants. I don't know.
I couldn't tell you. I'm not going to do it, so don't worry about it.
I need a whole show about this eating.
I don't enjoy his eating habits. he is very talented on the
Mayonnaise and
football.
coffee?
It's disgusting. It's crazy. But he is a very good football player. Another guy who's probably going to go in the first round of next year's
That's
NFL
the guy
draft.
the Jets need.
Maybe.
You already want a new quarterback?
They need someone who's got that dog in him.
Oh, God.
But no, I do think Kentucky is going to surprise some people with Will Levis. They had a good year last year. I think they're going to continue that success this year.
Against who? They're playing Florida.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
they're playing Florida.
That's going to be an interesting game.
That's a loss.
Yeah, but I mean, there's also, I'm curious what you guys are thinking because, obviously 1 and 2 is Alabama, Georgia. We'll talk about them in a bit, but Texas A&M, I mean, they're number 6 as well.
They're always that team. A&M's always that team. They're just there. They don't make a lot of noise, but they're always really good.
Yeah.
And we never talk about them, like ever. It's like we look at the standings one day and we're like, oh, what are the rankings? Oh, A&M's sitting there at 6. Or it's like late in the season, we're like, oh, A&M's at like 5 right now. They might actually get in. And they never really do.
But then they just end up at 8.
The immediate time, it's a funny thing about A&M. Every year that once they immediately get any sense of attention, they lose their next game.
Yep.
It's hilarious. So
yeah, that's the thing.
That's why you're like A&M. Why are we talking about this? Because they're gonna go out and then they're just gonna lose to Vanderbilt or something.
They're not
They're not
gonna
gonna
lose
lose to Vanderbilt, but like it's just funny. Like if you hype them up, slam
Vanderbilt
the
is
money line when they
grandfathered
play
into
next
the
week.
SEC. They're not going anywhere, but they shouldn't be in the SEC.
The one thing I will say about Texas A&M, have a bit of an inexperienced quarterback in Haynes King after losing Kellen Mond to the draft last year. That is going to take some time for them to get used to.
Yeah. 100%.
Also, touching on A&M, they did not look very good last week
No.
against Sam Houston. I watched up until the delay in the second half. I was not impressed. They had like 2 big plays, and other than that, they couldn't get anything going against Sam Houston.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't watch the second of them
Not the
against
Houston
Sam Houston
Cougars.
State.
Not that team. Sam Houston Bearcats.
Yep.
And they spell Bearcats with a K.
Oh, come on,
crazy.
really?
They spell Bearcats with a K. That might be
That's
just
funny.
a typo on the schedule, but they spell Bearcats with a K. And you only won 31-0? That's a problem.
Those are your spring 2021 FCS champions, I believe, or
Sam
whatever the
Houston
spring.
Bearcats with a K?
I think so.
Really?
I'm
I didn't
pretty
know
sure.
that. Good for them.
I've been
And
told.
A&M, they're going to find a way to, like, look, they get the Gators at home. They'll probably win that game, but they're going to just find a way. They got to go to Bama. That's a loss. Okay, so that's one.
That's the other thing I wanted to say about Texas A&M, though, is their challenging matchups. Obviously, Bama on the road, just like put it in pen, that's a loss. But every other game they're playing against a ranked opponent, Miami, Arkansas, Mississippi, Florida, those are all home games for them.
I think
Really
they might
helps.
lose at Auburn. And I know Auburn's not very good, but, like, SEC, it's tough to win on the road. It doesn't matter who you are. Unless you're Bama or Georgia, it's tough to win on the road in the SEC. So
Absolutely.
they might lose that game.
Yeah, they certainly could lose that game. Another team to touch on, obviously, the Volunteers are back in the
Oh, really?
the rankings
About-
at 24.
about time.
I mean, they look like a bit of a formidable opponent. They do have to go play at Pitt next week, which I think is going to be
They're
one of the
gonna win that game.
One of the they could win. I don't think they'll win it, but I think it's going to be like one of the best games of the week personally to see the
I agree.
Volunteers. I have a soft spot for the Volunteers. I have a ton of family that grew up in Knoxville, season tickets, everything like that. So I do love the Volunteers, but as much as I love them seeing them ranked again, this is still the SEC. We need to get to the big dogs.
Right.
So obviously it's going to come down to just like Michigan, Ohio State. When do those two match up? What are you guys feeling about the Bulldogs versus the Roll Tide?
Unfortunately, first of all, they're not going to match up until, let's be honest, they inevitably meet in the SEC title
Yes.
game. They aren't currently on each other's schedules, which is disappointing for college football fans, but at the end of the day, smart for the SEC to kind of keep the loss off one of those two teams' schedules.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me on this one. I would kind of hope you would, but I do think Alabama is clearly the better team between these two, and I think, like I said, the last couple of teams we've talked about, it comes down to quarterback play, and look at Bryce Young. He's going to win the Heisman again. I mean, I think it's pretty clear.
He could.
I think
He
he's
could.
the best player in the country. And look at the other side of the football. He might not be the best player in the country.
Actually,
Will
Will Anderson might be.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think those guys could easily go 1-2 in the NFL draft next year. I think, obviously, they're Alabama. They have so much talent everywhere you look on the field. My one little concern with them is the weapons on the outside are a little bit younger, a little bit inexperienced. But
Yeah,
then
right.
again,
There's no Julio Jones there right now.
right, but they're all 5 stars who haven't played yet.
So they
Once
might
they
become
get on
Julio
the field,
Jones
they're
one
going to
day.
be fine.
Probably.
They're Alabama. They'll be fine. I have no worries about them whatsoever. They're going to round the table and win the national title.
You know I'm serious when I say this because and he knows, rarely happens. but I agree with Josh Golden.
Whoa! Wow. Well, you agree with him on Ohio State.
Well, but that one was like a gimme. This one
more
actually has some back and forth pull. But yeah, I mean, I'm always going to pick the team, especially in the SEC with the premier quarterback play, and they also have that generational, sack pressure. They have the 1-2. Josh stated it very easily for me. It's going to be Alabama in my mind. They might not drop a game. They probably won't drop a game. They're going to be the one going into the playoffs as well, which we'll touch on later. But yeah, roll Tide, as gross as it is to say it out loud for me.
I don't think Alabama's going to lose a game in the regular season.
I agree.
But I think their toughest test might be this week against Texas. And I know they're heavy favorites against Texas, and they should easily win that game.
They're given 20.5 points, Jackson.
I remember, and I'm going to go back to last year.
Their toughest game is Texas A&M.
No, that's at home, though.
Doesn't matter.
And that's Texas A&M.
Texas is not good.
I'm going to tell you why. Because there's going to be 100,000 screaming Texas fans in that building. And I remember last year I went to Alabama, Florida in person. And you couldn't hear anything when Bama had the ball. So they're going to have to go silent count. Mm-hmm. And I remember Bama took a 21-3 lead in that game, and they only won by 5. And they were... I think it was
40-38, I believe.
No, I don't think it doesn't matter.
It was a close game.
It was a very, very close game, and so Texas. That's it. Alabama should beat Texas this week, but I would not be surprised if we end up looking back on this schedule in the regular season, at least before they play Georgia in the title game. I don't think we're going to be surprised at least I won't, if this is their toughest test, and it ends up being a close game in the fourth quarter.
It was 31-29 Florida in that game, or Alabama in that game last year.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't need any more memories on that.
There are 4 games on Alabama's
point.
schedule that are harder than this game is.
You're going to win at Tennessee.
Right. But we can't, as much as I love to run through their schedules, Jackson, are you going with Bama?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all taking Bama.
So we're all taking
best
Bama.
team in the country.
The one thing that will also tie us together with Bama is the fact that we're all going to have them in the college football playoffs.
Really?
And that
what a shocker.
That is, I know, real big shocker, guys.
That's a
we're
shocker.
throwing some real heaters out
Here's
the end.
the more important question with Bama, though, Leo, is when they enter the college football playoff, do you have a 0 in the loss column for them?
I personally do.
I agree.
I would agree, but I do want to make sure, because we are quickly running out of time here. We got to throw out these college football playoff predictions. So, I mean, are we all going to run Bama at the 1, I assume? But
yeah.
Josh, I'm excited to hear yours. Take me through your 4 teams.
Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame, in that order.
Fighting Irish. Okay.
Fighting Irish get in. I really like Marcus Freeman. I think Tyler Buckner had a great game for them last week against Ohio State. By the way, graduate of Helix High School for you, Leo. Give you that one right there.
There you go.
They got Michael Mayer, the best tight end in the country. He's going to be a first-round pick in next year's draft. Really, really physical defense. And I love Marcus Freeman. I think a young guy taking over this program injects life into some of these players, and I think it's just a really, really good change of culture for them, and I think it's going to propel them to the college football playoff.
All right.
So back to, just on Notre Dame, I really don't want to see them in the playoff just because we know what happens when they get to the playoff. They'll get blown out. But that's besides the point. I'm going to be obvious here. Go Alabama, Georgia.
Yep.
I'm also going to take Ohio State, so I'm off to a great start with the chalk.
Yep.
So now I need a 4th team, and I'm kind of sitting here looking at all these Power 5 teams, and I'm like, well, who has a chance to win 11 games and win their conference title? And I'm going to pick USC. There it is.
Beautiful pick.
USC.
Yeah. Jackson, that's my pick. That is literally mine as well. I don't want to pick the Fighting Irish because I still think they're going to stumble at some points. It's just the weird part of the schedule. We already talked about Clemson. I think Clemson's going to drop some games to some formidable ACC opponents. And like I touched on earlier, the Trojans maybe drop 1 game going to Utah or maybe against Notre Dame.
And that won't be considered a bad loss.
That will be considered a bad loss. But
it wouldn't.
It wouldn't be considered a bad loss.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the great thing about this is we have Notre Dame. You have Notre Dame. We have the Trojans. I touched on earlier. They play November 26th.
That might be the game to decide the 4.
That could be a playing game.
That could be the playing game. So that would be an amazing game to look out for. But I just
and
like
the interesting
Trojans.
thing is that would be the last game on Notre Dame's schedule as an independent. USC would then have to go play the Pac-12 title game against, I would believe, Utah. You guys might think differently, but
no, Utah.
That's going to be a challenge for them to have to get over that hump after beating Notre Dame as well.
It's going to set up for an amazing end. I can't wait to look back. In
Can't wait to see how wrong I am.
To see how wrong all of us are. But, before we kick on out of here, any fleeting comments from both of you? Any crazy takes you want to throw out before you get off the air?
Bryce Young for Heisman. Football's back. Let's go make some money.
Awesome.
Sean Tucker is going to run for 1,800 yards.
Beautiful. Kept it at home with Syracuse. I mean, I would expect nothing less from you two. 1,800. Yeah, I heard it out loud. Well, unfortunately, that is going to do it here for the first episode of the No Pulp Podcast. I hope you have a big overarching view of everything college football, and do not be afraid to come back at any of us about any of our terrible college football takes. I certainly would love to see it all over Twitter. For one more time, that's been Jackson Holzer. That's Josh Golden. I'm Leo Silverman. Enjoy this week and this season of college football.